Tonight at 10, major gains for the Conservatives in England as Labour's leader admits his party's lost the trust of working people. The Tories win the Hartlepool by-election, a Labour seat for more than 6 decades. Boris Johnson is there to celebrate with his new MP.
If there's a lesson out of this whole election campaign, the whole local election campaign across the whole of the UK, it's that the public want politicians to get on with focusing on their needs and their priorities.
A shattering day for Labour in England as Sir Keir Starmer says he takes full responsibility for the result and for fixing things.
Very often we've been talking to ourselves instead of to the country, and we've lost the trust of working people, particularly in places like Hartlepool. I intend to do whatever is necessary to fix that.
Staying in power, the Scottish National Party makes gains, but it's unclear if they've done enough to secure an overall majority.
The SNP appears to be on course for a 4th consecutive election victory and to be on course to have the privilege of forming a government again.
In Wales, Labour holds firm and the Conservatives look set to become the second largest party in the Welsh Parliament, overtaking Plaid Cymru. Also tonight, Portugal, Israel and Iceland are among 12 countries you can visit after May the 17th without self-isolating on return. The scene is set for the Champions League final in Istanbul, but thousands of Chelsea and Manchester City fans are told they can't now go as Turkey is put on the travel red list. Dozens of people are helped to safety as a tower block in London catches fire. It's partly covered in cladding similar to Grenfell Tower. And millions more are told they'll be offered an alternative to the AstraZeneca vaccine as the under-40s are added to the list.
And later in the hour, we'll have Sports Day on the BBC News channel with all the latest reports, results, interviews and features from the BBC Sports Centre.
Good evening. The Conservatives are celebrating a major victory in the Hartlepool by-election, with the Prime Minister saying the result is a mandate to continue to deliver for the whole country. But Labour's vote fell by 9% in the first electoral test for its leader, Sir Keir Starmer. He called the results bitterly disappointing and said he would do whatever it takes to rebuild trust in the party. The Conservatives made history by winning Hartlepool for the first time in more than 60 years, with the Tory candidate, Jill Mortimer, winning almost twice as many votes as her Labour rival. The result was the start of a trend that continued in local council election results across England, with the Conservatives picking up councils like Dudley, Nuneaton and Harlow. This is how the BBC projects the party's performances in the English local elections would translate in a general election. Meanwhile, in Scotland, the SNP have won some, but not all of their key target seats. It's not clear if they'll gain enough to secure an outright majority. We'll have the very latest from Scotland and from Wales, where Labour are on course to retain power shortly. But first, let's go live to Westminster and our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
Sophie, this isn't a general election, but my goodness, it gives a striking general impression of what's really going on in politics in just about every corner of the country right now. There's plenty of really important detail that we'll talk about in the next half hour. But for the big picture, the Conservatives are cock-a-hoop, Labour limping, disappointed behind. And nowhere is that more apparent than in that important by-election in Hartlepool, where the Prime Minister couldn't resist the temptation of paying a visit today.
Oh, look at this guy. He looks a bit like...
Who does he look like? Who else? The Tory Prime Minister, pumped up and inflated to 100-foot high.
Thank you.
With his party taking big strides, trampling over territory Labour used to treat as its own.
Has she taken it yet?
Yes.
Far from an overnight shock, but another step forward in a journey that started long ago.
It's a mandate for us to continue to deliver. For not just for the people of Hartlepool, not just for the people of the North East, but across the whole of the country. The public want politicians to get on with focusing on their needs and their priorities.
The air's gone out of his opponents. One Labour veteran said holding Hartlepool was a test of whether the party could hold its own. It did not here. And the Tories were digging in deeper taking councils in much of England, like Nuneaton, Dudley and Harlow in Essex. Little hope on Labour faces that things could be better since the thumping of 2019. Even with a newish leader, maybe things could only get worse.
Well, I'm bitterly disappointed in the results, and, you know, I take full responsibility for the results, and I will take full responsibility for fixing things. We have changed as a party, but we haven't set out a strong enough case to the country.
But a very public battle was underway over where next, even before he spoke. Labour's old opposing generals slugging it out.
It is amazing, because Jeremy Corbyn has not been leader of the Labour Party for, you know, a year. And yet here I was in Hartlepool, having his name, you know, being bandied around on the doorstep. Honestly, he casts a long shadow still.
But on the other side, pointing the finger in the opposite direction at Keir Starmer himself.
He said he wanted to make the moral case for socialism. He wanted a united party. And unfortunately, he's failed in all of those areas, because we're now in a situation, and Hartlepool is the manifestation of it, where people don't know what his vision is.
The local elections aren't just about the two biggest parties' wins and losses. There's been a long list of complex contests too. The Lib Dems picking up pockets of support again here in Cambridgeshire. And extra backing for the Lib Dems. And the Greens together edged out Labour from overall control in Sheffield too. But remember, there are many, many results to come. So far, it's Labour in the doldrums, but they expect to keep London and maybe march on in some parts of the south. And whatever happened to the banners in Powys, Labour's vote in Wales held up pretty well, down at least in part to the leadership of Mark Drakeford, more solid than the set.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Yet there's a huge headache for Labour and the Conservatives in Scotland. There's never been a doubt that Nicola Sturgeon's SNP would win this election. What we don't know yet is by how much, or exactly how hard she'll therefore push for another vote on independence soon, and isn't giving that away just yet.
Extremely happy and extremely confident that we are on track in the SNP for a fourth consecutive election victory and to have the ability to form a government again. And that's an extraordinary achievement for any political party.
For all the parties, with many votes not yet counted, there'll be losses unknown to commiserate and victories to celebrate. One Tory in particular, though, needn't wait to cheer. The Mayor of Tees Valley back with an almost unheard of level of support. Nearly 3/4 of all of the votes went his way.
Not only are we the party of the working family, but we are the new party of the North.
Claims that not so long ago would have sounded audacious, fanciful perhaps. But today's results, so far, underline with the real Boris Johnson at the top. It's not so far-fetched now. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
In Scotland, the SNP have picked up some of their key target seats. They are set to form the next Scottish government, but they may not have won enough seats to secure an outright majority in the Scottish Parliament to bolster their calls for another independence referendum. This is the current situation. We won't know the full results until tomorrow. Our Scotland editor, Sarah Smith, has the latest.
Angus Robertson, Scottish National Party, 16,276.
Every seat that has changed hands in Scotland has gone to the SNP, with a dramatic victory in Edinburgh Central, previously held by former Tory leader Ruth Davidson. They also took Ayr from the Tories and East Lothian from Labour. It's a return for one of the SNP's big hitters.
In this most European of capital cities, people have resoundingly rejected the party of Brexit and Boris Johnson. The public has rejected all of the parties that want to block an independence referendum.
Well done. Nicola Sturgeon is confident she will win a mandate to hold another vote on leaving the UK and secure a remarkable fourth term in government.
If that is indeed the outcome of this election, I pledge today to get back to work immediately to continue to steer this country through the crisis of COVID, to lead this country into recovery from COVID, and then, when the time is right, to offer this country the choice of a better future.
Voters who don't want independence appear to be using their votes tactically to back unionist parties. In Dumbarton, Labour held on as Tories switched to the party most likely to beat the SNP. While in Dumfriesshire, after a power cut and some emergency lighting, the Tories increased their vote at the expense of the Labour Party.
The Constitution was put front and centre in this campaign by the SNP and their desire to divide Scotland all over again. But Scottish Conservatives had a clear, ambitious plan for what we can do in the next Parliament if we can get rid of the threat of another independence referendum.
The SNP have made gains, but tactical voting by unionists in some of the key seats they hope to take means it now looks difficult, if not impossible, for them to achieve an overall majority. But with the addition of the Scottish Greens and the SNP, it seems clear there will be a pro-independence majority in the next Parliament. A feline interloper had to be carefully ejected from the count in Orkney. As the SNP held on to Airdrie and shots, Neil Gray's wife tweeted a request he bring home milk, and he did as he was told. Anis Sarwar has only been Scottish Labour leader for less than 3 months. In that short time, it appears he has not yet transformed Labour's really poor recent results.
Compared to where we were just 10 weeks ago when I took over this job, it's a magnificent turnaround. But I'm not pretending this journey is complete. I'm not pretending the project to change the Labour Party is complete.
Former First Minister Alex Salmond had hoped to make a comeback with his new Alapa party, but now admits they're unlikely to win a single seat. Now remember, we've only had less than half of the results in Scotland. Tomorrow we'll get far more, including on the regional list. And that will change the picture quite a lot because the Tories, Labour and the Scottish Greens pick up most of their seats there. So it's only once we've had all of those results we'll see just how large the pro-independence majority in this new Parliament is and where that takes the argument for another referendum on Scottish independence.
Our Scotland editor Sarah Smith, thank you. In Wales, Labour has held firm in elections for the Welsh Parliament. The Conservatives have made gains and look set to become the second largest party, overtaking Plaid Cymru. This is the situation at the moment, with more than half of the 60 constituency and regional results declared. Our Wales correspondent, Hal Griffith, reports.
For over 2 decades, through every political storm, Labour has held on to power in Wales. With every election cycle, its numbers have only moved a little. Right now, it looks like a party on the up. In the Rhondda, a seat Labour lost 5 years ago, it's taken back control.
I now invite the successful candidate to the stage.
In Llanelli, it's turned a wafer-thin majority into a healthy lead. And the celebrations may be understated, like the party leader, but there's no doubt he's delivered.
I started this campaign answering questions as to why this was going to be Labour's worst ever result, a poll prediction of 22 seats. The campaign never felt like that to me. We've had a fantastic and energetic campaign with hundreds of people involved and real enthusiasm on the doorstep.
COVID dominated the campaign. It changed voting too, slowing down the count. The final results now won't come until tomorrow, but the winners and losers are already clear. The Conservatives have claimed new territory, like here in the Vale of Clwyd. Their final tally tomorrow should be up, but they know when they've been beaten.
At the moment, very optimistic. It's looking positive in certain seats for us and on the region as well. But it does look as if obviously many Labour voters have returned to the fold and endorsing some of the work that Mark Drakeford and his government have done through the pandemic.
Plaid's hopes of putting independence at the centre of this election failed. It lost ground. What it saw as an opportunity.
Yes, I'm frustrated and impatient whenever we don't make as much progress as I would have liked. Why? Because that's the only way that we can deliver future to the people and the communities that I've spoken to across Wales. But I'm heartened by the fact that we have made progress in the rising self-confidence of our nation.
The landscape here is changing slowly. The Lib Dems may disappear completely, and the party which wants to shut down the Senedd could pick up seats. But it will be Welsh Labour at the helm once again, trying to steer their way through the next 5 years. Given Labour's woes elsewhere, what's happening here in Wales could be seen as a silver lining. And the party's leader, Mark Drakeford, seems to be completing his transformation from an anonymous academic few here had even heard of 2 years ago to a political pin-up. A leader who seems to be on the verge of equalling Labour's best ever performance in Wales. We'll know the final numbers tomorrow morning.
Hal Griffith, thank you. So the first big result of the day came early this morning when Hartlepool elected a Conservative MP for the first time in more than 60 years. One shadow minister called the result absolutely shattering. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been finding out why, after so long, the town has gone blue.
As the sun came up on the northeast coast, the news came in.
Jill Mortimer, Conservative Party candidate, is duly elected.
After decades of Labour, Hartlepool awoke to a Tory MP.
Through this result, the people have spoken.
These early swimmers had sensed a shift coming. When we met them before the election, they'd been ready for waves.
Everybody in Hartlepool's always voted Labour, and it's just a change now because we've seen a brighter future.
My poor dad would turn over in his grave because he was a staunch Labour supporter. But there you go.
Jeff's been unconvinced by successive Labour leaders.
They allowed themselves the indulgence of Corbyn, but for ordinary people, it frightened the horses, big style. It scared me. When Starmer and the likes came up here, nobody knew what the message was. I don't even think they knew what the message was.
Paul, once a shop steward, now an active Tory supporter, lost faith in Labour over years.
In Hartlepool, it just didn't do anything. It just relied on the fact that they had a block vote that was unchallenged, and it's taken a long time, I think, for people to start to realise that we were just taken for granted. And it's a tragedy.
This goes beyond Hartlepool. Labour's bond with what was the party faithful has been loosening over time. Support's eroded in towns and concentrated in cities. The reasons both complex and contested. But in areas that backed Leave, Brexit's clearly played a part. And for many, he's been a catalyst.
S-Class. Big Boris, isn't he?
This was the victory tour today.
Is he going to buy all fish and chips? Everybody.
His party has pledged this town big investment, and expectations are high.
People here say they've taken a chance on the Tories. He'll have to keep his promises to them if he's to keep their support. The challenge for Labour is much greater. They have to understand why people switched and respond if they're to find a way back to Downing Street.
There is awareness of the struggle ahead here. This former Labour MP lost his seat in nearby Sedgefield at the general election.
People in the past have called them, and probably still do, the left behind communities, which is a phrase I hate, because they haven't been left behind. They've moved on. It's the Labour Party that's being left behind because they're not speaking the language of the local people, and we need to regain that if we're going to win an election again.
The lines on the political map have blurred and shifted. Labour's fate depends on the course it now takes. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Hartlepool.
Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, is in Westminster. Plenty more votes still to be counted, but your assessment tonight?
Well, Sophie, that's a good reminder that this huge set of results isn't yet over, but there are three things I think we can say for sure tonight already. Is number one, the Tories have moved further along their long-term journey of grabbing areas that Labour used to be able to rely on. Important to remember, that hasn't happened overnight. It didn't just happen in the last 24 hours. It didn't even just happen in the 2019 general election. But it is more evidence of a really profound move over time where Labour are really getting squeezed to the cities and fewer parts of the country. Second of all, we've also had a reminder today of the sometimes fragile connection between events in the Houses of Parliament behind me and how people watching tonight really feel about what's going on. Boris Johnson's had a torrid time in Westminster in the last few weeks, yet millions of voters have reminded his party and people who sit on the green benches that actually he's a magnet for millions of voters. And Labour, who'd been setting the agenda round here for the last little while, well, they've discovered today, rudely, perhaps to some, that they are still a brand for many people that is something they don't want to have anything to do with. And thirdly, we've really seen today that we're in the scenario where there are very different situations in terms of the politics of different parts of the country. That's not just about the very interesting situation in Scotland, still yet as unresolved, but it's also about what's happened in Wales today, where Labour's performance there differs greatly to what's been happening in England, and the different environment in towns and cities in north and south of England too. And all the parties have to grapple with that fact that the jigsaw gets more and more complicated as time goes on, even after the last 5 or 6 years of real turmoil in what used to be a pretty stable political system.
Laura Kuensberg in Westminster, thank you. The international travel ban for England will start to be lifted slowly in 10 days' time. Portugal, Israel and Gibraltar are on a list of just 12 green countries that you will be able to travel to without quarantining on return. But some on the list, like Australia and New Zealand, won't actually let you in. Meanwhile, Turkey has been added to the red list for travel, so thousands of fans with tickets for the Manchester City-Chelsea Champions League final at the end of the month now can't go. Here's Caroline Davis.
Relief in Portugal today. Just 2 months ago, the country was on the UK's red list. Now, it's one of the first to go green.
No one enjoys a holiday more than the British people, and we all know that. And they bring a colourful atmosphere to everyone, and all the restaurants and bars and all the hotels around the Algarve, in Lisbon and Porto. And it's just, you know, this is a happy moment for now. It's a happy moment for everyone.
12 countries and territories, including Portugal, Gibraltar, Israel, Iceland, Singapore, Australia and New Zealand, will be classed as green, meaning anyone travelling from there to England won't need to quarantine from the 17th of May. That doesn't mean all of these countries will welcome tourists. Some, like Australia and New Zealand, will not.
There are only 12 countries and territories on this list. Many passengers will be very disappointed by that, as will the industry. Why are there so few?
We are having to be cautious about this initially. We don't want to overturn all the brilliant work of, frankly, the British people in taking these vaccines and staying at home and all of that pain. And so we can't do anything to put that at risk.
Please place your own bags in the lockers and close them once they are full.
After months of preparing, this isn't the grand reopening many in the travel industry were hoping for.
Data and science will tell you that you could add the majority of European countries onto that green list. And they have failed to demonstrate what data and proof points they're using, why that should not be the case.
3 countries have also been added to the red list from 4 a.m. on Wednesday, including Turkey, where the Champions League final between Chelsea and Manchester City is due to take place later this month. The government has confirmed talks are happening to try to bring it to the UK and said fans shouldn't travel there.
I don't think anybody was looking forward to the idea of 8, 10, 12,000 supporters travelling to Istanbul, which is the worst COVID hotspot in Europe at the moment.
More countries will be added or removed from the list every 3 weeks, and the government say those fully vaccinated will be able to show their status on the NHS app from the 17th of May. For now, travel to most of the world is still not possible, but more is promised just over the horizon. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Millions more people will be offered an alternative to the Oxford-AstraZeneca jab after the choice was extended to adults under the age of 40 because of concern over rare blood clots. The under-30s had already been offered a different jab. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, reports.
The Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine is the main workhorse of the NHS immunisation campaign and highly effective at preventing serious COVID infection. But unlike the Pfizer and Moderna jabs, it's been linked to a rare clotting disorder. 28.5 million doses of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine have been given in the UK up to the last week of April. There have been 242 cases of rare blood clots combined with low platelet levels, almost all after the first shot. The overall incidence is 1 in 100,000 doses, but the risks are higher for those in their 30s, where it rises to 1 in 60,000 doses. There have been 49 deaths in total. That's 2 deaths per 1 million doses of vaccine. Falling infection rates means the threat to the under 40s from COVID is now so small that the potential risk from the AstraZeneca vaccine to this age group looms larger. So where possible, they'll be given a different jab.
We offer this advice, which places a high priority on safety in the hope that it will further increase vaccine confidence, so that those of us who are being offered a vaccine in the coming weeks can feel more confident and feel more able to step forward, accept the offer of a vaccine.
The NHS is still on target to offer every adult a first dose by the end of July, and vaccines remain the key to ending the pandemic.
They have already saved over 10,000 British lives. But actually the greater value of these vaccines is the lives they will save in the future by keeping the disease under long-term control. And that is why we must finish the job.
The under 40s play a key role in transmission of coronavirus, so vaccination will protect them in any third wave and protect the vulnerable even more. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, the latest government COVID figures show 2,490 new infections in the latest 24-hour period, meaning an average of 2,060 new cases per day in the last week. 15 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period, meaning 12 deaths were announced on average every day in the past week. 127,598 people have now died with coronavirus across the UK. As for vaccinations, just over 35 million people have now had their first COVID jab, and more than 16.5 million people have had their second vaccine, meaning they are now fully vaccinated. Police are appealing to the public to help identify a man who was seen close to where the police community support officer Julia James was killed 10 days ago. They've released a photograph that was taken in Kent the day after the 53-year-old was found dead near her home. She died from significant head injuries. Helena Wilkinson reports.
Who is this man? Detectives desperately need to know. They say he could be the key to unlocking what happened to Julia James.
Somebody knows who that man is. We desperately need you to make contact with us and help us identify who that person is. If that person is watching, please make contact with us. We believe that you have crucial information.
The man in the image that police have released today was spotted somewhere along this country lane in Aylsham last Wednesday, the day after the body of Julia James was discovered. This is an area that's not far from the crime scene. Where the photograph came from or who took it, police won't say. Julia James had been walking her dog when she was attacked. Just a few hundred yards from her home, she suffered significant head injuries. Her husband posted this photograph of them both, saying how much he missed her. A reward of up to £10,000 has been offered by Crime Stoppers for information leading to a conviction in this case. Officers from forces across the country have now been asked to support Kent Police on what continues to be a challenging case for them. On the 10th day of this investigation, they're hoping they're getting closer to the breakthrough they need. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News, Aylsham in Kent.
New allegations of sexual misconduct have been made against the actor and director Noel Clarke relating to his time on the BBC's Doctor Who. More women have come forward and spoken to The Guardian, alleging incidents of harassment and inappropriate behaviour during the making of the BBC One series. The BBC says it was shocked to hear of the allegations. Noel Clarke has strongly denied all claims made against him. In Myanmar, more than 750 people have been killed since the military seized power 3 months ago. Thousands have been detained, including the elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. It's become increasingly difficult to report what's happening, with the internet effectively blocked, borders closed and many journalists detained. But people are documenting their ongoing resistance, including one young musician whose story the BBC's Rebecca Henschke has been following.
Myanmar in the grips of an uprising triggered by a military coup. Mass protests demanding a return to democracy met with brutal force. In the middle of this, we meet 18-year-old Pone. His generation is fired up, defiant and determined to bring back democracy.
The military have messed with the young generation because, you know, we are not the same as what they have faced in the past. We have already tasted the sense of democracy for 5 years, so we will not be afraid they underestimate us.
This was Pone's world before General Min Aung Hlaing seized back power. He's a musician who was just about to release his first album. The coup crushed those dreams. We followed Pone over weeks as he took to the streets, armed with homemade shields. The military hits back this time with tear gas and rubber bullets. The next day, near Pone's house, the response is live ammunition. The horror captured on social media, the tool protesters are using to tell the world what's happening. The military has promised a new election will be held, but have refused to provide a timeline. State TV now announces each night who will be arrested next. Pone and his sister decide, like many, to flee Yangon. He's talking about joining an armed resistance.
The situation here is getting worse and worse. This might be the goodbye. Before ending this video, let me say one thing. We, the people of Myanmar, will never accept the military coup, and we will fight until the dictators bend down to hell.
More than 750 people have now been killed. The fight for the future of Myanmar looks long and violent. Rebecca Henschke, BBC News.
And for more on that story, you can watch Our World, Myanmar, The Spring Revolution on the BBC News channel on Sunday evening. That's at 9:30. Dozens of people had to be rescued from a tower block in East London this morning after a fire broke out and spread over 3 floors. The flats are partially covered in cladding, similar to the type used at Grenfell Tower. More than 30 people needed medical treatment for smoke inhalation. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports.
For people in flats with fire safety issues, this is the nightmare.
It's open!
But at 9 this morning, it's what confronted residents.
As I opened the door to leave my flat, that's when I bumped into one of the security guards running up, screaming that there's a fire, get out. And he was sweating, and I could clearly tell that this was serious, it wasn't a drill.
120 firefighters tackled the flames and rescued residents, some suffering from the effects of the smoke.
We recognise that this has got cladding that is very similar to Grenfell. We have got our fire investigation teams and our fire safety teams looking at this building and the procedures that we put in place.
The fire spread 3 floors of a building which has silver cladding, identified as a risk. Experts believe it is likely to be combustible, and work to start removing it was due to begin in the coming weeks. But that's after a delay of more than 3.5 years since it was first identified as a problem.
This could happen again. We need to get this cladding off buildings as soon as possible. Not waiting around for finance, not waiting around for new bills to go through government. Get it off, keep us all safe. There are hundreds of thousands of people that are affected by this.
The building's owner, Ballymore, said the cladding didn't play a part in today's fire, but the government has accused a subsidiary of the company of consistently failing to take action to remove it. £8 million from the government's Building Safety Fund has been allocated to speed things up, but flat owners will have to find the rest. That's £3.5 million. Tom Simons, BBC News, East London.
A reminder now of our main story tonight, and there have been significant gains for the Conservatives in England's elections, including in the Hartlepool by-election, which the Tories won from Labour for the first time in more than 60 years. Labour's leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has conceded that his party has lost the trust of working people. Labour has fared better in Wales, holding firm, and in Scotland the SNP has made gains, though it's not clear whether they'll have enough seats for an outright majority in the Scottish Parliament. Votes are still being counted, with the results continuing to come in tomorrow and, in some cases, on Sunday and Monday. And we will, of course, bring you all the latest throughout the weekend, and there is a full list of results as they stand on the BBC News website. But that's it from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.